February 1944. Over the North Sea, a B-17 drags itself westward on 3 engines, aluminum skin trembling in the cold. One propeller hangs dead, feathered and still, a silent weight pulling the aircraft backward through the sky. Behind them, German fighters are climbing, their engines biting clean air, gaining altitude with ease. Inside the bomber, the crew waits for the navigator to say something that makes sense. He is 22 years old, and he has just erased the route everyone memorized. The air war over Europe has become a problem of geometry written in blood and aluminum. Routes are drawn weeks in advance by men seated at long tables in London and High Wycombe, far from flak bursts and frozen cockpits. They calculate fuel burn, wind drift, fighter interception ranges, and anti-aircraft corridors using averages and probabilities. The routes are printed, distributed, drilled into crews until they feel permanent. Doctrine, stability, order. In the winter of 1944, that order is killing thousands. The 8th Air Force has been striking German industry for 18 months. The losses are no longer shocking. On bad days, 1 bomber in 10 fails to return. Crews climb aboard knowing the math is against them. They trust the system anyway, because deviation means confusion. Confusion breaks formations, and broken formations invite slaughter. Navigation in wartime Europe is nothing like peacetime flying. There are no radio beacons, no illuminated runways, no friendly voices offering corrections. Below is hostile territory or darkness. Rivers are disguised. Roads are fakes. Cities are blacked out or burning. The Germans have even built entire false airfields with wooden aircraft to draw bombs away from real targets. A navigator works in a cramped compartment behind the cockpit, surrounded by charts, dividers, drift meters, and protractors. He calculates ground speed by watching the Earth slide past through a small window. He measures wind by timing smoke markers dropped into empty air. Every few minutes, he updates position, plotting courses that account for weather, enemy defenses, and the formation's constantly shifting speed. It is mathematics performed at 25,000 feet in sub-zero air while flak detonates outside and the aircraft shudders under the weight of 5,000 pounds of bombs. Most navigators are educated men, college students pulled from classrooms and sent through intensive training pipelines in Texas, Arizona, and Louisiana. They learn trigonometry, astronomy, dead reckoning. They pass exams. They arrive in England confident, clean, and unprepared for what the sky over Germany demands. Veterans can spot them immediately. They trust forecasts too much. They believe instruments without question. They assume the wind will behave. The North Sea teaches them otherwise. It is a featureless gray void between England and the continent, unforgiving and deceptive. In winter, weather changes by the hour. Cloud layers stack from wave tops to 30,000 feet. Ice forms on wings and inside cockpit windows. Magnetic compasses swing erratically near the bomber's mass of metal. A navigator can lose his position in minutes and never recover it. And if he brings his aircraft over the wrong stretch of coast, the flak batteries will correct him permanently. By early 1944, the 8th Air Force has refined navigation into rigid procedure. Lead navigators guide entire groups. Every aircraft is expected to stay in formation and follow the leader home. But battle does not respect formation. Engines fail. Fighters attack. Bombers fall out of line, suddenly alone and exposed, with a navigator forced to find a way home through hundreds of miles of enemy airspace. Some succeed. Most do not. Those who survive learn something headquarters does not like. Manuals assume ideal conditions. Combat never provides them. When instruments disagree with reality, someone has to decide which one is lying. His name is Paul Archer. He grew up in an Oregon logging town beneath the jagged outline of the Cascade Mountains. His father worked in the mills. His mother taught piano. Paul was a quiet child, the kind who dismantled clocks and sorted their parts on the kitchen table by size and function. He understood systems early, how small changes affected larger outcomes. In high school, he ran cross-country, not fast but efficient. Before every meet, he studied the terrain, finding paths that shaved seconds without increasing effort. His coach called it cheating. Paul called it navigation. He enrolled at Oregon State to study forestry. The war interrupted. In 1942, he enlisted, and when the recruiter asked if he was good at math, Paul said, "Decent." That was enough. Navigation school sharpened him. Celestial fixes, dead reckoning, pilotage, radio navigation. He learned the tools well. But what set him apart were the questions. What happens when two methods disagree? Which do you trust when the compass lies? How do you navigate when everything fails at once? The instructors told him to follow procedure. Procedure saves lives. Paul listened and quietly kept thinking. He joined a B-17 crew training in Texas. The pilot, Harlan Voss, liked his questions. The co-pilot thought he overthought everything. Paul kept drawing alternate routes in pencil on the margins of his charts. In January 1944, they arrived in England. Norfolk, cold barracks, steel-planked runways, gray skies that never seemed to lift. Paul flew his first combat mission and watched bombers vanish into cloud banks and smoke columns. On February 7th, they were briefed for a mission to Brunswick. Paul studied the return route. It avoided heavy flak but added distance. 30 extra minutes of flight time. 30 minutes of fuel. 30 minutes of exposure. He drew a straight line across the Frisian Islands instead. 40 miles shorter. Deadlier on paper. Safer if anything went wrong. He showed it to Voss. The pilot looked at it a long time. Why would we ever do that? In case we don't come back clean, Paul said. Voss folded the map and handed it back. Let's hope we don't take damage. Paul didn't erase the line. The mission to Brunswick launched before dawn on February 10, 1944. 36 B-17s lifted from the Norfolk fields in tight intervals, climbing through layered cloud toward a sky already scarred by contrails from earlier waves. Inside Archer's bomber, the temperature dropped steadily as altitude increased. Breath fogged the oxygen masks. Instruments stiffened in the cold. Paul Archer bent over his chart table as the North Sea slid beneath them, invisible under cloud. He logged time hacks, corrected for wind drift, recalculated ground speed. Everything aligned, too neatly, he thought. Forecast winds rarely behave this politely. He noted the discrepancy in pencil, then kept working. They crossed the Dutch coast at 26,000 feet. Flak appeared almost immediately, black, deliberate bursts that hung in the air like punctuation marks. The bomber shuddered as shrapnel rattled the fuselage. Archer felt it through the table, a dull vibration that made his pencils dance. Then the fighters arrived. Focke-Wulf 190s dropped from above the formation, cannon flashes strobing in the thin air. One B-17 took a hit square in the cockpit and fell away in a slow spiral. Another lost an engine and slid backward, trailing smoke. Archer forced himself to keep plotting. Panic ruined math. 12 minutes from the initial point, the bombardier called out readiness. Voss steadied the aircraft. Bomb bay doors opened, adding drag, bleeding speed. For 6 minutes they flew straight and level, unable to maneuver, unable to hide, while flak stitched the sky around them. At 11:47, the bombs dropped. The aircraft lurched upward as the weight vanished. Voss banked left toward the rally point. That was when the number 3 engine exploded. The sound was a physical blow, metal tearing itself apart. The aircraft yawed violently to the right. Flames streamed along the wing. The engineer shut down fuel, feathered the prop. 30 seconds later the fire died, leaving scorched metal and a dead engine dragging them back. They tried to hold formation. It didn't last. With one engine gone and another running rough, the B-17 couldn't keep pace. The gap widened. The protective box of bombers pulled away, shrinking into cloud and haze. 10 minutes later, they were alone. A straggler. Voss asked for a heading home. Archer stared at the chart. The planned return route curved northwest, avoiding heavy flak belts, but adding distance. With 3 engines, and 1 degrading, that route meant 90 minutes of flight time. They didn't have 90 minutes. Archer checked fuel burn rates, recalculated twice, then a third time. The numbers refused to soften. At best, they would ditch in the North Sea 30 miles short of England. He reached into his flight bag and unfolded the chart with the penciled line. The short route, he said into the intercom. Across the Frisian Islands. Silence followed. The co-pilot swore softly. The flight engineer shook his head. The radio operator said nothing, already listening for fighters. Voss asked how bad the defenses were. I don't know, Archer said. But the long way kills us for sure. He laid it out cleanly. Distances. Fuel consumption. Engine performance at reduced power. Zero margin. No optimism. Just math. Voss stared ahead through the windshield. Outside, the sky was empty, for now. "Give me the heading," the pilot said. Archer drew the line carefully, measuring with a straight edge. 120 miles. 70 minutes. He handed over the compass heading. Voss turned southwest. They descended to 18,000 feet to save fuel. The engines ran smoother in denser air. Archer worked continuously, tracking time and heading without visual reference. Cloud hid everything below. If his calculations were off by even a few degrees, they would fly straight into the densest flak. 20 minutes in, the radio operator called out contacts behind them. Fighters climbing. Voss pushed the throttles forward. Fuel burn increased. Archer recalculated again. The margin shrank to nothing. Then he noticed a penciled notation near the coast, something he'd marked weeks earlier. A British air-sea rescue ship stationed offshore, within range of RAF patrols. 5 degrees south. 3 extra miles. A gamble. "If we turn," Archer said, "we add distance. But if they break off, we can pull power back and save fuel." Voss didn't hesitate. He banked. The fighters closed. 4 miles, then 3. The tailgunner called them out. FW-190s, 3 of them. Then the radio crackled. RAF fighters vectoring toward the rescue ship's position. The Germans heard it too. Archer watched through the waist window as the fighters peeled away, diving back toward the continent. Voss reduced power. Fuel flow dropped. Archer checked his watch, then his chart. They were going to make it, if nothing else failed. Ahead, the Frisian Islands broke through the cloud like torn strips of land. German radar masts and flak pits were visible even from altitude. Gun barrels elevated as they passed overhead. The first flak burst detonated behind them. Then another. Closer. Archer tracked time with relentless focus. 2 minutes to clear the islands. The aircraft shook as shrapnel passed nearby. One burst lifted them violently. Another cracked somewhere near the nose. Then the islands fell behind. The North Sea opened ahead, flat, gray, endless. Archer exhaled and immediately went back to work. 40 miles to the English coast. 32 minutes. Fuel remaining, 35. It was going to be close. The B-17 crawled westward over the North Sea, engines throttled back to the edge of usefulness. The aircraft felt suspended rather than flying, held aloft by calculation more than power. Inside the fuselage, no one spoke unless necessary. Every word seemed to cost fuel. Paul Archer hunched over his chart table, pencil hovering, updating position by time and heading alone. There were no landmarks now, only gray water and low cloud breaking into darker patches. The wind was calm. That small mercy mattered. 30 minutes to landfall. Fuel remaining, 35 minutes. Voss leaned the mixture carefully, squeezing efficiency from tired engines. Airspeed dropped to just above stall. The co-pilot watched the gauge as if it were a heartbeat monitor. At 20 minutes out, the number 4 engine coughed. Once. Again. Oil pressure fell to 0. The engineer feathered the propeller, killing drag. They were down to 2 engines. "Prepare for ditching," Voss ordered calmly. The radio operator transmitted their position to air-sea rescue. Gunners cracked open waist windows, hands already moving toward life rafts. No one panicked. Panic wasted oxygen. Archer recalculated. 2 engines. Reduced power. Maximum economy. Fuel remaining, 20 minutes. Distance to coast, 18. They might still make it. The bomber trudged on, altitude slowly bleeding away as Voss traded height for distance. Archer watched the clock. 15 minutes. 12. 10. Then land. A thin gray line on the horizon, barely distinguishable from sea and sky. Archer marked it with a decisive stroke. "Landfall," he said. Fuel remaining, 8 minutes. They descended through broken cloud. The English coast sharpened into cliffs and fields. A lighthouse slid past beneath the left wing. At 5 minutes of fuel, Archer spotted it. An emergency airfield, pierced steel planking glinting faintly through cloud gaps. 10 miles, he said. The number 2 engine sputtered, caught, sputtered again. 2 minutes of fuel. Voss turned toward the runway. Landing gear dropped. The engines ran on fumes now, vibration uneven, sound hollow. They crossed the boundary fence at 200 feet. Both engines quit almost together. Silence. The B-17 glided, heavy and unstoppable, slammed onto the runway hard enough to blow the tires. The aircraft skidded, veered left, and ground to a stop in wet grass beside the strip. For several seconds, no one moved. Then the engineer laughed. Once, sharp and disbelieving. Archer looked at the fuel gauges. Both needles rested on 0. They climbed out into cold English air and stood beside the dead bomber. It would never fly again. But they had. An RAF officer arrived in a jeep, studied the damage, and asked how they'd made it back on 2 engines. Voss pointed at Archer. The navigator redrew the map. The officer examined the charts, the penciled lines, the alternate route carved through enemy airspace. He said nothing at first, just nodded slowly. Those charts went to headquarters. No commendations followed. No reprimands either. But the idea spread. Other navigators began carrying penciled alternates. Shorter routes. Riskier routes. Routes that only worked when everything else failed. By spring, dozens of damaged bombers had used variations of Archer's shortcut. Some didn't make it. Many did, who otherwise wouldn't have. Paul Archer finished his tour, returned home, and lived a quiet life. His charts yellowed in archives. His line across the Frisian Islands never became doctrine, but it became something more useful, an option. Because sometimes survival doesn't come from following the plan. It comes from knowing when the plan has already failed and having the courage to draw a new line with a pencil and trust the math more than the rules. And sometimes, that's enough to get you home.